Hi there, this is Evis T back with you for another quality guide from geekhammer.co.uk, although what kind of quality is questionable. Here we'll be facing down for the third time against Barthandelus, one of the recurring enemies in Final Fantasy XIII, so let's get down into this. Okay, this is actually probably the easiest encounter you'll have with this boss. I've been grinding quite a lot before I went in, but still it wasn't a particularly tough enemy. I had most of my class skills up at nearly maxed out level 4. Not quite maxed out, and definitely not all of them even on the last sphere, so you don't really need to grind to be able to beat this boss, but it does make it easier. Begin with the usual routine. Start by getting your buffs up and debuffing Barthandelus if you can. He's susceptible to Imperil, D-Shell, and also to D-Protect. If you can get all three of those on him, you can inflict a horrendous amount of damage, especially if your commandos have an N-Fire or N-Frost or whatever on their weapons to maximise the Imperil. There's not really much you can say about this guy. If you are actually having serious trouble with him, you may actually need to go back and level. I know I just said you shouldn't really need it, but that's the only thing I can foresee which would actually cause difficulties. Okay, we saw the Ultima attack there. That's actually pretty piss poor, as you saw there. If you switch into a Sentinel based paradigm just before he unleashes it, it'll barely even tickle you. As you can see, I like to use protection. Now, there are better paradigms for a lot of the things I'm doing here. Relentless Assault is my preferred offensive paradigm, but Try Disaster also works really well if the enemy's chain gauge is near the top. Putting a little info dump there. If you want to actually check Barthandelus' stats, you can do so by pausing the video back at that point. And like I say, if you can just stagger him and then lay down the hurt with Relentless Assault, or if you have it, Try Disaster, which is 3 Ravagers. Try Disaster is absolutely brilliant because it lets you rack up the damage very quickly. Unfortunately, it's of very little use outside stagger because it offers no healing ability and causes the enemy's chain gauge to crash out very quickly. You can see here I'm using Fang because her abilities as a Saboteur and as a Commando are really good. Saz because his abilities as Synergist and Commando are really good and he makes a very good Ravager too. And Hope because he's the consummate medic. Thanatosian Laughter. Now, this is actually probably the only attack Barthandelus has which can cause issues. As you saw there, it hits like a ton of bricks. Now again, he telegraphs it and the controls don't lock you out, so if you can, slip into a Sentinel based paradigm to absorb as much of the pain as possible. When you're trying to absorb a boss's big attacks, try wherever you can to use beg your pardon, I'm slipping over my own words. Try to use Combat Clinic wherever you can, because it lets you heal up almost as soon as the attack's gone off. The thing about these big attacks is they don't kill you, especially if you've advanced far enough on the Crystarium to get the Reprieve skill, which means if an attack would kill you but your HP is over a certain threshold, you just take a lot of damage instead but aren't knocked out. It's the follow-up attacks that'll finish you off. You only got 200-300 hit points left and suddenly the boss sneezes and the entire party falls over. So you want to make sure that you've also got a Sentinel-based healing paradigm to heal up shortly after these big attacks. If the Sentinel's there, it increases your chance of surviving any follow-ups that the boss is going to throw at you. You can see here I'm just wearing him down, using Relentless Assault wherever possible to build up his chain gauge, and sticking with Relentless Assault to also inflict maximum damage whilst the enemy's staggered. Again, if you've got Try Disaster, use it. Beyond that, all you need to do is keep your buffs up. You'll notice that I have the Protection paradigm as my healing and Sentinel based, but then I also have another paradigm which I utilise called Superiority for buffing the shit out of my party and also inflicting debuffs on the enemy. Here we go with Ultima again. And there's also a third one I have which also features Medic, Synergist and Commando, which is useful for keeping the enemy's chain gauge up and actually doing DPS whilst you're healing and buffing. That one's a very useful one because if you need to heal up, then you can also put your buffs back in place at the same time. I know some people would prefer to stick a Sentinel there so that the enemy's DPS is lowered, so your healing is a bit more effective. All these tactics work. If you've got a tactic which you've found very useful for this boss, by all means stick a comment on this video and share it with the world. I'm sure that there are other people who found better ways of defeating this boss. I'm just showing you one basic way. With regards to that as well, all the endgame bosses, you don't get any big bonuses for 5-starring them, so don't feel that you need to do so. If you're getting mauled, go on the defensive, and you don't gain any bonuses, nothing at all for these 5 stars, so just seriously don't worry about it. Okay, you can see here the enemy's staggered again. Normally what I would try to do is go for a 5 ATB gauge attack. You can see here, high wind. Should just about get it. Yep, there we go. Now those attacks are your big hitters. They do loads of damage, especially if you manage to max out the enemy's chain gauge. But as you can see, the chain gauge is wiped out when they do it. This means that they're best done right at the end of an enemy's stagger. It requires good timing, but if you can pull it off, the damage you inflict over the course of the stagger combined with the big attack at the end will simply wipe out absolutely everything. Okay, this fight's nearly over now. As you can see, I've got all 3 debuffs on him, so anything I hit him with is going to hurt a lot. I've also got currently in production guides for Orphan, both first and second forms, so if you're having trouble with those, feel free to check on the YouTube channel. All the other videos should be there, along with a few other bits and pieces. And there we go, boss fight over with a full 5 stars, even though I was playing fairly defensively. Oh, as a final point, if you look in the description of this video, you'll find a link to a written version of this guide, which you can print off and have with you by your side if you're still having trouble and need a reference. Oh, that's it. See you soon.